And so I want to start at the most obvious place with a series called Liar. I want to start with a Chinese general named Sun Tzu who lived about 300 years BC. Deal? Great. Everyone's favorite guy. We're not going to talk much about him, but Sun Tzu was a brilliant Chinese general, unbelievably skilled at battle, at combat, at war. And he famously wrote a book called The Art of War. Famous book. You might have read parts of it in school, but a famous, famous book, The Art of War, where this Chinese general unpacks all of his strategies for how to fight and how to win a war. And he says a lot of stuff, but there's three little words that he says that have been etched into the corridors of history, and there's these three words: know thy enemy. Sun Tzu said that if you understood your enemy, if you understood his tactics, his intentions, his strategies, if you could predict his next move because of how intimately familiar you were with your enemy, you could win a war. It wasn't just about yourself having the best strategies. It was understanding your enemies, understanding what your enemy had planned. So let me ask you tonight. All over the New Testament of the Bible, the Christian life is compared to war. It's compared to a spiritual battle. Paul talks about it as our struggle is not against flesh and blood. Peter talks about it like the devil is a prowling lion trying to eat you. All over the New Testament, the Bible talks about how the Christian life is not this just kind of like be a good person, make it through kind of thing. The Christian life, actually, war is kind of an apt metaphor. We have an enemy, the devil. We talk a lot about God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit. That makes sense. We'll keep doing that. We tend to not talk very much about the devil. So let me ask you, assuming that the devil is your enemy, how well do you know him? How well do you know his strategies? Could you articulate the ways that the devil seeks to trip you up? If it's true that there is an enemy, an accuser, the devil, who hates you, who doesn't want you to follow Jesus, who doesn't want you to do faith, who doesn't want you to get in the wheelbarrow, who wants to get in the way and sabotage your life with Jesus. If that's true, it would sure be helpful to know his strategy, wouldn't it? Like how the devil does that. How has the devil historically done that? In the Bible, how does we see the devil actually play out tactics and strategies like a skilled general trying to end you? How well do you know your enemy? Do you know his strategies? The year is 1940. It's in the middle of World War II. And to put it mildly, things aren't going well for the Allied forces, especially the British military. Because of their physical proximity to all the Axis powers, they are just getting pounded by Nazi Germany. They are getting outflanked, outmaneuvered. Every time the British military feels like they have an edge, it's taken away from them. Every time the British military feels like they have found a strategic way to fight their enemy, they are surprised, or the Germans figure out what they're about to do. No matter what the British military tried, it basically seemed impossible to fight back. This was largely due to the fact that Nazi Germany had developed a technology called the Enigma machine, if you're familiar with it. It looks almost like a typewriter, but what it is it's a coding machine. And so you could put a written message into the Enigma machine, and it would basically encrypt it. It would turn it into a coded message that unless you had, for yourself, an Enigma machine and knew how to use it, you couldn't read the message. And so what Germany would do is they would encode all of their messages through the Enigma machine. And so even when Allied forces were able to intercept a message from a German general to forces or whatever, they couldn't read it because they couldn't crack the code. And this was a brutal disadvantage for the British military. The Germans were constantly spying on them, but the British military basically had no way to figure out what the Germans were planning and when, because the Enigma code was basically viewed as unbreakable. The Allied forces had tried for years to crack this code with no obvious success. This went on until the British military had an idea. They stopped trying to crack the code, and instead they started an elite spy group called the Boniface. These Boniface spies became famous overnight as the most elite spies in the world. They were so secretive, so skilled at their craft, that not a single one was ever captured in war. In the entirety of World War II, not a single Boniface spy was ever taken captive. In fact, there is no name that has ever been released of a true Boniface spy. And they were effective. From the moment the spy organization went into effect, the British military began to win. They began with uncanny precision to target German outposts. They began to preempt attacks. Whenever the Germans would leave a warship undefended, like seconds later, the British army would attack. This spy network of Boniface spies was so unbelievably effective, it basically turned the tide of the war, and historians agree, had it not been for this little group of spies, the war would have probably been 2 years longer than it was. An unbelievably elite, powerful spy organization. Here's the kicker. 26 years after the war ended, some strange information was shared by the Allied forces. Some strange information about the Boniface spy group. This is direct from British intelligence. They shared this in simple terms. The Boniface spy organization was a lie. It didn't exist. The reason that no Boniface spy was ever captured is because there were no Boniface spies. There was not a single one. It just didn't exist. It was a giant, bold-faced lie which covered up a horrifying, horrifying fact. The British had cracked the Enigma code only a few years into the war. They had built their own Enigma machine. They had cracked the German code. And instead of tipping their hand and showing their enemy that they had cracked their code and let them create a new one, instead the British military created a fake spy organization to take all the success for their knowledge and information. Isn't that clever? Super clever. Before the British would receive a communication that was encrypted, they would de-encrypt it, realize, oh, this very significant enemy warship is going to be over here, we should go sink it. Instead of just going and sinking it, they would fly a Boniface spy plane overhead first. And the Germans would be like, oh, that's how they figured it out. A massive lie. The British Army even allowed some of their own outposts to get destroyed in battle to cover up the fact that they could actually understand everything the enemy was saying. A simple little lie shortened a war by 2 years. The power of a lie. Let me ask you, what's the goal of a lie? To bend the truth, to put false ideas in your head? No, the goal of a lie is to get you to live in a false reality. That's what the goal of a lie is, right? A lie doesn't do you very good unless it changes reality for someone else. If you're little and you took a cookie from the cookie jar, I don't know why this is the example, but everyone uses it. I never had a cookie jar. When you're little and you took a cookie from the cookie jar and your mom's like, did you take a cookie? And you're like, no, you lie. You're trying to get your mom to live in a false reality, aren't you? You're trying to get your mom to live in a twisted reality that does not line up with true reality. You're trying to get your mom to live in a reality in which you are not guilty. If you take your parents' car out and you put a scratch on the side of it and you get it home and your mom's like, what happened? And instead of being like, oh, I saw a dog that was cute and so I hit the curb. Instead of saying that, you're like, I don't know. I came back to it. It was in a parking lot and someone had scratched it. I don't know. I'm a victim. You're creating a false reality, aren't you? You're saying, if you were to live in the true reality, I would be in trouble. I would not flourish. Therefore, I'm going to put forward a false reality that I want you to live in so things are different. And let me tell you, friends, this is what the enemy does to you. This is exactly what the devil does to you. You see, the problem, to quote John Mark Comer, that the problem with a lie is not that you believe it, it's that you live it. And what the enemy does over and over and over again with us is he lies. He lies and he lies and he lies, not to fill your heads with bad theology or bad opinions, but to fill your head with things that lead you into living in a false version of reality. Understand this, the strategy of the enemy against you, the strategy of the devil, is not to get you to do bad behavioral things. It's not to tweak your theology. The strategy of the devil is to get you to live in a false reality, a twisted version of what is actually true, to get you to mistake what is the lie for what is the truth. And the devil's done this for as long as time has gone on. In John chapter 8, Jesus is having one of his typical sparring matches with the Pharisees, and they're telling lie after lie after lie, and finally Jesus explodes at them and says this: the devil was a murderer from the beginning, not holding on to truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and he is the father of lies. Notice how many times it says liar in there? What does Jesus think about the devil? He's a liar, 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 liar. That's what Jesus has to say about the devil. Because the devil is a murderer. He's a liar. He's the father of lies. When he speaks in lies, he's like he's speaking his native language. There's no truth in the devil. He is a liar, a liar, a liar through and through. The devil, simply put, is a liar. And so this whole series we're going to go into for the next 3 weeks, what we're going to do is we are going to acknowledge the lies that the devil uses to sabotage Christians. These specific lies. The specific lies that the devil uses to shape your view of reality. To shape your view of reality. Think all the way back to the Garden of Eden. Right? God creates all of creation and he puts a tree in the middle of the garden. And what does he tell humankind to do with that tree? Nothing, right? He says, don't touch my tree, right? God creates everything perfect. He goes to Adam and Eve, and he stamps yes on everything in creation, but on one thing he says no. So Eve goes to that tree, and the devil comes over. And Eve says, I shouldn't take from that tree. Reality is that if I take from that tree, it will lead to my death. What does the devil say? He goes, no. It won't lead to your death. You'll be like God. That's what's going to happen. God's holding out on you. Do you see the false reality? What the devil's trying to do? The devil's not just trying to fill Eve's head with bad ideas. He's saying, no, you're living in a false reality. The real truth, the real reality, the way that the world really works is that God is holding out on you. You need to take for yourself. God only helps those who help themselves, right? Take for yourself. God's holding out on you. That's reality. That leads to life. But it's a false reality because in reality, as God has defined it, taking that fruit leads to death. It's what the enemy does with us over and over and over again. He says, the things that you think will lead to death, they actually lead to life. The devil lies in such a way to twist your view of reality until what is good is evil and until what is evil is good. To lead you into a false version of reality that doesn't lead to your flourishing, it leads to your death. And the enemy is good at it. Here's how he does it. The devil starts with a lie. The devil tells lies. And he engineers his lies to appeal to your desires. A lie isn't very good if you don't want to believe it. Right? A lie has to appeal to your desires. So the devil does, he creates a lie and he makes it tempting. He makes you want to believe it. The devil doesn't tell lies that aren't very fun to believe. The devil tells lies that on the surface seem like they'd be a lot of fun to believe. Wouldn't you like this to be true? And then here's the kicker. And here's why many of us are kind of like, well, I can't remember the last time the devil showed up in my living room and lied to me. The devil normalizes his lies in culture. The reason the devil is such a dangerous adversary, the reason he is an adversary at all, the reason we need to talk about the devil like this, give him some attention for a minute so we can understand his tactics and his strategies, is that he's sneaky. He tells lies that appeal to what we want, and then they become normalized in culture until we just assume everybody thinks that way. The lies of the devil don't look like these fiery red letters etched in the sky that tempting you to believe them. It's not like a demon tapping on your shoulder. The lies of the enemy, the lies of the devil, they often feel more like cute little ideas that are repeated again and again and again in our culture. Little ideas that sound right on the surface, but once you push on them just a little bit, you start to realize these things don't lead to flourishing, they lead to death. We've been tricked. Let me give you an example. Who's heard this? The heart wants what the heart wants. We've heard that before? John Mayer and Katy Perry wrote a song about it. There you go. I think Selena Gomez wrote a song about it too. The idea is this: your heart wants what, you have no control over what it is that your heart wants. The desires of your heart, you aren't in control of them, and you shouldn't repress them. You shouldn't say no to something you want, because that's like repressing yourself, right? That's unhealthy. Right? If you're filled with lust and you find yourself gravitating towards pornography, you shouldn't restrict yourself. You shouldn't say no to yourself. Who cares? It's not hurting anybody, right? Heart wants what it wants. Or it's like, man, there's that person I want to date. I really want to date them. I think they like me. This would be a lot of fun. But you know, like, man, that is not wise right now. For whatever reason, you know that's not the right choice. But you go, the heart wants what the heart wants. I really want it. I just want it. And I can't repress myself, or I'm going to feel disappointed, or I'm going to feel let down, or I'm not being true to myself. Whatever is in me, we ought to act it out, right? The heart wants what the heart wants. Does anyone know where that phrase comes from? Let me freak you out a little bit. It's an old poem from the 1800s, but no one knew it. No one knew that phrase until a filmmaker by the name of Woody Allen said it. Anyone know Woody Allen? Made a few movies, Midnight in Paris. He says it in a Time interview. You can look it up. I have to warn you, it's not fun to read. He says it in a Time interview. It's the very last thing he says in the interview. And in the interview, the Time interviewer is asking him about a new relationship that Woody Allen is in. Let me tell you the story. Woody Allen is married to a woman named Mia Farrow. It's his second wife. And one day, Mia Farrow comes home. They've gotten married a little bit later in life. And she walks into their living room, and she sees pictures on the mantle, pornographic pictures, completely nude, with Woody in them, with that girl who is her daughter, her 22-year-old daughter. Woody Allen is 56. Woody Allen had started a secret sexual affair with his wife's 22-year-old daughter, created pornographic content of her, and displayed it around the house. He didn't forget to take it down, by the way. In the interview, he gets asked, did you just forget to put it all away? He goes, no. And the Time interviewer, you can feel that they're confused, right? And they go, well, don't you see something wrong with this? And Woody Allen goes, no. Heart wants what the heart wants. Gross, right? A simple, seemingly innocent statement, the heart wants what the heart wants. On the surface, we go, yeah, if your heart wants something, don't say no to it. Don't say no to your desires. Don't say no to your sexual appetite. If you want something, go for it. Follow your heart, right? Your heart won't deceive you. Your desires are the truest thing about you. Sounds right on the surface, but we dig a little deeper and we see this. That's not a nice little fortune cookie statement. It's a lie from the enemy. A lie from the enemy appealing to your desires for selfishness, appealing to your desire to do whatever it is that you want, and it becomes normalized in a culture that is completely comfortable with selfishness. When we see the heart wants what the heart wants, we don't recoil, do we? We're like, yeah, maybe. That sounds kind of right. Lies from the enemy that appeal to our desires and become normalized in our culture. Here's the good news. Jesus liberates you from the false world of the enemy's lies. Jesus liberates you from the false world of the enemy's lies, of the devil's lies. What I want you guys to understand tonight is this. This is a series called Liar, in which we're talking about the devil a lot, but it's still about Jesus. Because the good news is that the things that Jesus teaches, his commands, his practices, faithing, getting in the wheelbarrow, y'all understand, those things aren't engineered just to make you a behaviorally better person. Jesus doesn't tell you to love your enemy because he wants you to be a nice guy. Jesus tells you to love your enemy because it is deconstructing a lie from the enemy that says hating your enemies is good. They deserve it. Jesus doesn't tell you to go the extra mile for someone, to lay down your cloak for them, that even when they hit you, turn the other cheek. Jesus doesn't tell you to do that so you'll be a more peaceful person. Jesus tells you to do that to resist the lie from the enemy that violence is a good answer to violence. The commands of Jesus, the things Jesus tells you to do, all those moral commands, they aren't there to make you a nicer, more Christian-y, kind of cute little church kid. They are there to get you to live in the real world. The commands of Jesus, the way of Jesus, faithing, getting in the wheelbarrow, that's not intended to make you more moral. It's intended to make you real. It's intended to say, here's the real world and how God has designed it. I invite you to live in it. The enemy, he's trying to sell you a bill of goods. He's a liar through and through. Lies are his native tongue. He's trying to trick you. He's trying to manipulate you, get you to live in a false version of reality in which his way leads to flourishing. God is trying to form you in the image of Jesus Christ. The devil is trying to form you too. The cry of a Christian is, may heaven come to earth, like we sang tonight, right? The cry of the devil is, may hell come to earth. And it starts with you living in a hellish, false world that you think is a good one. Friends, in this series, what we're going to do is we're going to hold up the lies the enemy tells that become normalized in culture. I'll tell you the 3 lies right now. I wasn't thinking about doing this. Lie number 1 is, you can have it all. Life is all about including as much stuff as you want, balance it as best you can. Life is about including as much as you can. Lie number 2 is, live your truth. You do you. Lie number 3, and bear with me, is my body, my choice, which talks about a lot more than abortion. Those are the 3 lies we're going to contend with, and with each one, we're going to hold up that lie. We're going to do kind of like a cultural biopsy on it, where we take a little piece of it out, we put it under a microscope, and we say, what does this really lead to? Is this really true? And then what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how the way of Jesus actually liberates us from that false world and actually empowers you to resist the devil. You know what Scripture says over and over and over again happens when you resist the devil? He flees from you. That is a promise in the New Testament. Resist the devil, he'll flee from you. You know how you resist the devil? You follow Jesus. Get in the wheelbarrow. You just simply obey him, even when you don't understand why Jesus said what he did. You said, because Jesus said it, I'll obey it, because I know it's an invitation to live in the real world. I know the enemy's trying to trick me. I know the enemy's trying to get me to live in a false world. Jesus invites you to live in the real world. Will you do it? Will you choose the way of inauthenticity and just give in to the cultural narratives that the devil has supplied? Or will you live into a truly authentic, real way of living, in which you see the bill the devil is selling and you say, even though I don't fully understand the way of Jesus, I'm going to do it. I'm getting in the wheelbarrow because I know at least that's real. At least that's authentic. At least it's the real world. Y'all, I'm excited to go on this journey with you. I'm excited to unpack some lies from the enemy, and most importantly, to open our hands to everything Jesus has for us, inviting you to live a truer, more whole, more healed life. You in? Deal.